Hello everyone. In this presentation, we are going to discuss CRISPR-Cas9 based biotechnology. This is one of the most transformative technologies in modern biology. We know that CRISPR has fundamentally changed how scientists edit genes, making the process much faster, cheaper, and more precise than ever before. So, let us explore how it works, um, its most cutting edge applications in various fields like medicine and agriculture, and the important ethical questions it raises. So, in nature, viruses or the bacteriophages, the ones which attack the bacteria, they actually outnumber bacteria. So, they are like 10 to 1. So, if these bacteriophages are so good at killing bacteria, how are there, any bacteria left on Earth? So, we know that the bacteria have evolved a whole range of defense mechanism or basically tricks to protect themselves from the phages. So on your screen you can see some of these processes or tricks. So for example, blocking the adsorption, then injection, so they block the injection, or the assembly, or the replication, or also the mechanism of cell suicide. And one of the mechanisms are the restriction enzyme modification systems, and one of them is, of course, CRISPR. So, all these mechanisms are the innate mechanisms which defend the bacteria against the phages in general rather than targeting a particular type of phage. CRISPR, which is the main mechanism which we are going to discuss. So, this is an adaptive immune system. So, it defends the bacteria against specific viruses or phages and adapts to recognize new threats. So, CRISPR stands for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. And Cas9, this is an enzyme that acts like molecular scissors. So, as mentioned earlier, this system evolved in the bacteria, as a defense mechanism against the viral infections. And these systems, these systems, they are found in about half of all bacterial species and nearly all archaea. So, in a nutshell, CRISPR system works by capturing small pieces of invading phage DNA or the viral DNA, then they stash them in the host cell genome, and using these molecular memories, they find and destroy the matching phages in the future. So that's the whole concept behind the CRISPR-Cas9 mechanism. So when a virus attacks, the bacteria capture the fragments of the viral DNA and it stores them in their genome. And later, if the same virus is going to attack again, the bacteria is going to produce RNA guides that recognize the viral DNA and then use the Cas9 enzyme to cut it, which is going to destroy the virus. So you have the natural CRISPR locus inside a bacteria, which consists of alternating segments of DNA repeats and spacers. So here you can see that entire sequence here, CRISPR sequence, okay, which is has the repeats, which are the identical palindromic sequences, which are going to act as the placeholders. And then you have the spacers, which is the segment of the DNA captured from the virus. And then this is all integrated into the host genome, or the host bacterium. So when the virus injects its DNA into the bacteria for the first time, the Cas proteins are going to cut a snippet of this foreign DNA known as protospacer. And then, so here you can see this green one. Okay, this is the one which is going to get inserted into the host CRISPR array. So then you are now, as you can see, there are different colors. Okay, so these are from the earlier, whenever the virus attacked the bacteria. Okay, now here this green one that you see, this is the new one which is going to be inserted. So this is the new spacer here. Okay, the bacteria then is going to transcribe the entire CRISPR sequence into a long RNA strip, and this strip is then chopped into smaller units called CRISPR RNA or cRNAs. So each cRNA contains a single spacer, as you can see here. This green one here. So there is going to be another one which is going to have a red spacer. Then you are going to have a purple spacer. So each CRISPR RNA is going to contain a single spacer sequence paired with the surrounding repeated sequences. And thus the CRISPR RNA is then going to bind to a defense enzyme known as Cas9. And it is this spacer portion of the RNA which is going to help the Cas9 to recognize and then bind to the CRISPR RNA. So the spacer portion of the CRISPR RNA serves as the biological most wanted target, which is going to guide the Cas9 enzyme to now bind and then cut the viral DNA, which is going to disable the threat. Okay, so this is the whole mechanism which has been adapted by the scientists to do the editing of the genes using CRISPR. So now we know that the scientists have adopted the CRISPR-Cas9 from the defense mechanism against viruses in the bacteria under natural circumstances. And it is the interplay of the CRISPR sequence and the Cas9 enzyme which is using the guide RNA, which leads to cut the target DNA sequences. So you have the DNA target sequence, you have the Cas9 enzyme, and then you have the guide RNA, which is going to lead you to the target sequence which needs to be removed. Once this is achieved, the desired DNA sequence can be added to the main DNA genome. So the overall mechanism involves 5 general steps. Number 1, guide RNA design, target recognition, then DNA binding, then DNA cleavage, and then the cellular DNA repair. So these steps, all these steps, they enable the precise and efficient editing of specific genes within the genome. Now let's look at each step one by one. So now we are looking at the steps which are involved, in the mechanism of CRISPR-Cas9, and what are the steps which scientists and the researchers use to do the gene editing while using CRISPR. So the gene editing begins with the designing of the guide RNA or the gRNA. This is the one which is going to act as a GPS, location, trying to look for the location, the target sequence which needs to be edited in the CRISPR-Cas9 system. So the first step for the scientists is to identify the DNA sequence they want to edit. So let's say they are going to, the target sequence is this 20 nucleotide long, okay? The DNA sequence, 20 nucleotide long sequence. So this is, then this is the one which they are going to use to design a guide RNA with a 20 nucleotide sequence which is going to be complementary to the target DNA. So this complementary sequence determines exactly where the DNA will be edited. So this is the location which is going to be guided by the complementary designed gRNA or the guide RNA, which is having the complementary sequence to the target DNA. So the guide RNA, which you can see here, it has two parts. The guide sequence, which you can see here, the guide sequence, which is going to recognize the target DNA, okay? And it also has a scaffold. And this scaffold is the place which is, where the Cas9 protein is going to bind. So this, the accuracy of the CRISPR-Cas system depends largely on this design. So if you have a well-designed guide RNA, then it is going to give proper direction to the Cas9 to arrive at the correct location, which is going to minimize the off-target effects, or the wrong editing or editing of the wrong target sequence, in the genome. So the guide RNA, this is the one which is going to provide, let's say, the address. So this is going to one which is going to give the address that this is the place where you need to come, and the Cas9 is going to follow that address to that precise DNA sequence which is going to be edited. So the first step was the designing of the guide RNA. The next is, once the guide RNA has been designed, the next step is target recognition, that is finding the right site. So the guide RNA is going to first bind to the Cas9 protein. Okay, so the guide RNA, this is the guide RNA, it is going to bind to the Cas9 protein. As you can see, it is going to, the scaffold is this side. So the Cas9 is going to bind to the scaffold side, and we get a CRISPR-Cas9 complex. Okay, this CRISPR-Cas9 complex then moves along the DNA genome or the DNA sequence, and it is going to scan thousands of base pairs to locate the exact target sequence. However, the Cas9 does not stop and bind everywhere. What it is going to do? It is going to first search for a short DNA sequence called the PAM, PAM, or Protospacer Adjacent Motif. Okay, so the PAM acts like a molecular checkpoint, or like passkey or passcode. So if you do not have a PAM sequence, without a PAM sequence, Cas9 cannot bind to or cut the DNA. It is only when Cas9 encounters a PAM, it briefly opens up the adjacent DNA and checks whether the nearby DNA sequence is complementary to the guide RNA or not. If the sequence does not match, as you can see here, if it does not match, let me put a cross here. If it does not match, the complex quickly moves on. it doesn't stop here, it just keeps on moving, okay, and continues searching elsewhere in the genome for the complementary sequence. But if the sequence matches, okay, perfectly, the guide RNA base pairs with the target DNA, which is going to form a stable RNA DNA hybrid. And this confirms that the correct target has been found, and then it is going to position the Cas9 for the next stage. And what is going to be the next stage? The next stage is the DNA cleavage. So, if you remember, in the natural bacterial CRISPR immune system, we have the, in the bacterium, the spacer, which is the fragment of DNA captured from the previous viral infection, which we saw in the earlier slide. So that is called the protospacer. The PAM, which is the, as I mentioned to you, protospacer adjacent motif. This is located immediately adjacent to the protospacer. And this one allows Cas9 to distinguish the foreign DNA from the bacteria's own CRISPR DNA. So this is going to, this helps in the prevention of accidental self-cleavage, because the bacteria doesn't want to, get its own genome cleaved. So this differentiation happens because of the presence of PAM, which is the sequence which is located immediately adjacent to the protospacer. And because of this, Cas9 is able to distinguish the foreign DNA from the bacteria's own CRISPR DNA. So the overall main points are: the guide RNA binds with the Cas9 protein, forming a CRISPR-Cas9 complex. This complex is then going to move, and scan the genome to locate the matching DNA sequence, or which is the target DNA sequence. The target DNA sequence recognition occurs only if the sequence is next to a PAM, which is the protospacer adjacent motif, which is going to confirm the correct binding site. So after this, the next step is the DNA binding and positioning. So once the correct sequence, the DNA sequence or the target sequence is found, the guide RNA is going to base pair with the target sequences. As you can see, the Cas9 is also along with it. This big blue is the Cas9. So this complementary base pairing actually is very important, because this ensures that the Cas9 is properly located or precisely located at the place where it is required. And this base pairing actually ensures the high specificity of the editing process, which is the next, the next step, which is the DNA cutting. So once the guide RNA is firmly bound and the Cas9 is correctly positioned, the process is now going to do the DNA cutting. So for the DNA cutting, the Cas9 protein now is going to act as molecular scissors. So it is going to cut the both strands of the DNA at a specific position, which is generally approximately 3 base pairs upstream of the PAM sequence, which is going to create a double strand break, or DSB, and this is the critical event in the CRISPR gene editing. So please remember that Cas9 itself does not modify or replace the genes. Its main role is to make this highly specific double strand break. Okay? Once this double strand break has already been created, it is the cell's own DNA machinery which is now going to take over. So in the next slide, we will see the way cell repairs this break, which is going to determine whether the gene is either disrupted or precisely modified. So the Cas9 enzyme is only acting as molecular scissors, and it is going to create a double strand break at the target location in the DNA. So after the Cas9 enzyme has, is able to create the double strand break in the DNA, the gene editing process starts now, because the outcome of that double strand break is that the cell gets activated and it is going to start fixing its DNA repair by using different mechanisms, which is, with the aim of fixing the break. So the DNA repair by the cell, is the main step here, which is going to give us the outcome of the gene editing. So there are two major DNA repair pathways which the cell can follow. One is the pathway one is non-homologous end joining, or also known as NHEJ. The second pathway is homology directed repair, or HDR. Okay. Now, let's look at the non-homologous end joining, or NHEJ. Now, this is the cell's fastest and most common repair mechanism. So this is the fastest one. The broken ends of the DNA are simply joined back together, okay, without using any template. So this is very fast. However, since there is no template involved, the process is very error prone, and it frequently induces small insertions or deletions, which is also known as indels. And these mutations, when they happen, they can disrupt the reading frame of the gene, which may cause the gene to lose its function. So for this reason, this particular repair pathway is widely used when researchers want to knock out or inactivate a gene. So for example, you want to inactivate the gene of its biological role, or you want to eliminate the production of a harmful protein, then this pathway is very useful. The second pathway is the homology directed repair, or HDR. HDR is highly accurate. So in this repair mechanism, the scientists are going to provide a DNA sequence or DNA template, which is a very carefully designed template, and this template contains the desired genetic sequence. The cell copies the information from this template while repairing the break, as you can see here, which is going to allow a precise insertion or maybe correction or the replacement of the DNA sequence. Hence, you get a precise gene insertion, correction, or modification. So this is the pathway which the scientists use when they want to insert a new gene. So if you have to insert a new gene, so gain of function, new gene, or you want to make specific genetic modifications. So this because HDR is going to give us a very precise results, this is the one which is going to give us gain of function results. However, HDR, though it is very precise, it is less efficient. So it's less efficient than the non-homologous end joining pathway. Because here it mainly occurs, the HDR occurs during the specific stages of cell cycle, particularly the S phase and the G2 phases when the DNA replication is taking place. So depending on the outcome of your experiment, you can pick up the pathway. Okay. You can have the DNA cut, which is going to be made by Cas9, which is just the beginning. The final outcome of the CRISPR gene editing depends on which DNA repair pathway the cell uses. So if it is NHEJ, typically this is going to give us a knockout, and if it is HDR, it is going to give us a precise and targeted gene modifications. So we have seen how the traditional CRISPR-Cas9 methodology or technology is used, but over a period of time, this CRISPR technology has evolved significantly beyond this original CRISPR-Cas9 system. One of the important points that we learned is that in the case of traditional CRISPR-Cas9, it creates a double-strand break or DSBs. But now we have these newer tools which aim to improve the precision. So we need to have more and more precise gene editing and also reduce the unwanted mutations. So in this we have base editing, which is, this technique has allowed the scientists to change a single DNA base without cutting the DNA. And then changing the DNA base by converting one nucleotide into another. So it can convert one nucleotide to another. So base editing, this particular technique uses a catechically impaired Cas9 protein, also known as Cas9 nickase. So this is the name of the enzyme, nickase, okay? Also known as dead Cas9. And this is fused to deaminase enzyme to directly convert one DNA base into another without creating a double-strand DNA break. And then we have the base RNA guide or the guide RNA as the base editor, which is going to direct the complex to the target DNA, where the deaminase enzyme is going to make the precise change of a single base, making base editing ideal for correcting point mutations, where you have one single gene which is involved. And the whole method or the whole process is highly accurate. So what is the outcome? No double strand breaks, and we have very reduced off-target effects, making it very, very precise. So you have the dead Cas9, which is actually a genetically modified Cas9 protein that has lost its DNA cutting ability. So no double strand breaks, but it can still retain its ability to bind to a specific DNA sequence guided by the RNA or the guide RNA. Next we have the prime editing. This is even more advanced, and it enables precise insertion, deletion, and substitutions without the double strand breaks. The prime editing uses Cas9 nickase, which is in this case fused to reverse transcriptase. So in the base editing, it is fused to deaminase. Here it is fused to reverse transcriptase, which again enables precise DNA changes without creating a double strand break. So under, unlike the normal Cas9, the one that we were using in the traditional CRISPR-Cas9, the Cas9 nickase cuts, in this case, only one DNA strand. So that's why it's called NICK, N-I-C-K, NICK, okay? And this is going to greatly reduce the unwanted mutations and improves the editing accuracy. And then you have the reverse transcriptase, which is going to copy the new genetic information, which is encoded in the prime editing guide RNA or the PEG RNA directly into the target DNA, which is going to allow a precise base substitution, insertion, or deletion. So this is going to allow us precise edits without double strand breaks. Next, we have the CRISPR interference and CRISPR activation systems, which can also turn the genes off or on without altering the DNA sequence itself. So in the case of CRISPR interference, this one uses a dead Cas9, also known as dCas9, as you can see here, dCas9, that cannot cut the DNA. So it is just going to be guided by the guide RNA to bind a specific DNA sequence without cutting it. So there will be no cuts, no cuts. And then by physically blocking the RNA polymerase or by recruiting, additional transcriptional repressor proteins, this dCas9 protein is going to prevent the transcription and then silence the target gene. So if you have to silence the gene expression, we can use the CRISPR interference. So the technique that we use is CRISPR interference. So what is happening here? You have the dead Cas9, which cannot cut the DNA, but it is going to guide the RNA to bind to the specific DNA sequence without cutting it, and then it is going to block the transcription by preventing the RNA polymerase from accessing that particular gene. And when the transcription does not take place, the gene is switched off. Okay. Next, we have the CRISPR activation, which is used when you have to turn the genes on, again, without altering the DNA sequence. Okay. So in this case, again, we use a dead Cas9 protein, which is guided by a guide RNA, which is going to help to bind a specific DNA sequence, again, without cutting it. When this is fused to a transcriptional activator protein, so it is going to actually recruit the transcription machinery towards the promoter. And once this happens, it is going to lead to increase in the transcription, and which is going to thereby lead to the activation of the gene expression. So once you have the enhanced expression of the target genes, we are going to have a gene turn on, again, without altering the DNA sequence. So overall, this method activates the gene expression. So these different innovations are making CRISPR safer and more suitable for clinical use. This slide shows the timeline of the discovery of the CRISPR systems and their ultimate use in, and their applications. So it was in 1987 when the discovery of an atypical arrangement of short palindromic repetitive DNA sequences of lab genes in E. coli was discovered. Then in 2002, Janssen and colleagues introduced the term CRISPR. In 2005, when the bioinformatics already started being used by different research groups, the bioinformatics analysis actually showed the CRISPR's adaptive immunity. People were able to see the spacers and how the sequence of the spacers in the CRISPRs match the invading phage and the plasmid DNA sequences precisely. Then in 2011, Carpenter's team discovered the tracer's RNA's function in Cas9 DNA targeting. Then 2013, Zhang and Church adapted the CRISPR-Cas9 system for genome editing in mammalian cells. And then rest, as they say, is history. Carpenter and Doudna won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for developing the CRISPR-Cas9 as a gene editing tool in 2020. Since 2020, we have been using CRISPR-Cas9, and we are looking at the suitability of doing gene editing in agriculture, in medicine, and in biotechnology. So we have the applications of CRISPR-Cas9 in agriculture, in medicine, and in other biotechnological fields like biofuels and bioremediation, etc. So in this slide, you can see the applications of CRISPR-Cas9 in different fields like medical applications and diagnostics, gene therapy, drug development. In the case of biotechnological applications, we have bioremediation, biofuels, improved farming. And then in the case of agriculture applications, we have the introduction of disease and fungal and insect-resistant crops, and then doing CRISPR to improve the overall crop yields. So we have the applications of CRISPR in different fields. Here you can see the application of CRISPR in medical field. So CRISPR has actually transitioned from experimental research into real clinical treatment. CRISPR technique is being used to edit epigenomes, combating infectious diseases, doing drug target discovery, cell reprogramming, medical diagnostics, disease modeling, where you have like these knockout mouses, etc. Then we have the regenerative medicine and tissue engineering, and then of course application in oncology, and also doing basic research where CRISPR is being used to do the regular gene editing, in different systems. So recently, several milestones have been achieved using CRISPR, especially in the field of medicine. So we have the treatment of genetic diseases where CRISPR has been used to treat inherited disorders such as sickle cell disease and thalassemia, which actually result from the mutations in a single gene. In the field of cancer immunotherapy, CRISPR is used to genetically modify immune cells, particularly the CAR T cell therapy, which enables them to recognize and destroy the cancer cells. In 2023, we have the first approved CRISPR therapy. We are all familiar with the term Cas-GV, which became the world's first approved CRISPR-based therapy for treating sickle cell disease and thalassemia, making it a historic milestone in gene editing. In 2026, the first patient of hereditary angioedema, HAE, in the phase 3 trial of NTLA-2002 got the one-time CRISPR therapy that inactivates the KLKB1 gene to provide a potential functional cure for this hereditary disease. This is a rare disorder characterized by the recurrent episodes of severe swelling. Then in 2026, we have the CRISPR therapy CTX310, which actually targets the ANGPTL3 gene, and the results are quite promising, especially from the phase 1 for the treatment of refractory dyslipidemia, which is demonstrating that the CRISPR has the potential to cure or provide cure for these common diseases. The refractory dyslipidemia is, this is a disease where, in spite of lifestyle changes and also giving standard cholesterol lowering medications like statins or PCSK9 inhibitors, which are going to target your lipids. In spite of giving all this, the levels of fat or the LDL, HDL, or the lipid profile remains very high in the patients, and because of that they are more prone to cardiovascular diseases. So overall, these different milestones and advances demonstrate that CRISPR has evolved into a transformative therapeutic platform, which is going to be capable of treating both rare inherited disorders as well as common chronic diseases using the precise genome editing. And it is going to become even more and more advanced in the coming years and in the future. In the past few years, CRISPR has made rapid progress in clinical applications. So we have now over 250 ongoing clinical trials worldwide, which are exploring the treatments for a wide range of diseases. Some of the noteworthy examples are the personalized CRISPR therapy, which was tried in 2025, where the researchers at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia treated a patient with a rare genetic disorder using a custom designed CRISPR therapy tailored to that individual's mutation. So the therapy specifically targeted and corrected the faulty gene in the patient's cells, making a major breakthrough in the precision medicine and demonstrating that CRISPR treatment can be developed for a single patient use. And then we have already talked about the CTX310 for the cholesterol reduction. This is in phase 1 trial. This therapy targets the ANGPTL3 gene in the liver, leading to a significant and sustained decrease in LDL, cholesterol, and triglyceride levels. And this represents the shift towards using CRISPR for common diseases like cardiovascular disorders. Not only, just the rare genetic conditions that we have been discussing. And then we have, of course, the Cas-GV, which was approved in 2023, as I mentioned to you earlier, for sickle cell disease and the beta thalassemia. So this ex vivo CRISPR therapy edits the hematopoietic stem cells to reactivate the fetal hemoglobin production, reducing the disease symptoms. And this is why I'm showing you this again, because this is the first approved CRISPR-based treatments, marking the transition of gene editing into mainstream clinical medicine. So it's not, those days are not far when the doctors are going to actually prescribe the CRISPR-based treatment to their patients. And just like medicine, CRISPR also its applications are also there in the field of agriculture, where it is enabling the development of crops, which have enhanced resistance against diseases, resistance against pests, then making crops which have the ability to survive under environmental stresses such as under drought and under saline conditions. So we have the example of CRISPR edited rice, which have been engineered for improved drought tolerance and bacterial blight resistance. We also have the example of wheat, which has been modified to resist the powdery mildew, for example. We have the tomatoes, which have been edited to increase their yield and have longer shelf life, which is going to be beneficial for the farmers who are going to earn more, with the increased shelf life of the tomatoes. And also the consumers are going to be happy because they are going to get more fresh tomatoes for their consumption. And then we have soya beans with improved oil quality, which have already been commercialized. So, unlike the traditional genetic modification, CRISPR can make precise changes without introducing the foreign DNA, which may improve the regulatory approval and public acceptance. You see, these increased shelf life of tomatoes and wheat and rice, the transgenic crops for rice, they have also been created using the other gene modification methods. But in that, the regulation, etc., is very strict because of the introduction of a foreign DNA. But in this case, because there is no introduction of foreign DNA, I think the authorities are going to be a little bit more lenient in giving their approval. And also, overall public acceptance is going to be higher. Once people are going to know that there is no foreign DNA involved in this, I think people are going to be more open to using these products in their day-to-day life. So these advances, which we have discussed, they are critical for improving the crop productivity, because we need to increase the crop productivity. We need to have crops which are climate resilient, and we also need crops and foods which are nutritionally which are more nutritious and which are more healthy, which is going to contribute towards global food security. CRISPR is also being used in the industrial and environmental sector. So in industrial biotechnology, CRISPR is being used to engineer the microorganisms, such as bacteria, yeast, to improve the production efficiency and specificity. So these modified microbes, they are capable of, improved biofuels, for example, which is going to solve the problem of sustainable energy production. In the field of pharmaceuticals, which is going to lead to the manufacturing of cost-effective drugs. And then in the industrial enzymes, which is going to give us high performance enzymes to be used in the industries. And then, of course, the microorganisms, which are going to do the degradation of the pollutants and treat the wastewater properly. So which is actually the application in the environmental sector or environmental field, or the bioremediation. So for example, we have the CRISPR engineered Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is the yeast which has enhanced tolerance to high ethanol concentrations and temperature stress, which is going to lead to higher bioethanol yields, and we are going to have improved fermentation stability, and which is going to lower down our production cost. We have the example of E. coli in the pharmaceutical industry, where we have the CRISPR CRISPR modified E. coli, which is used to produce the pharmaceutical compounds such as insulin precursors and antibiotics more efficiently, which is going to enable precise production with, we are going to have less byproducts, making the drug manufacturing more scalable and cost effective. Then we have the CRISPR engineered Pseudomonas species, which can degrade the hydrocarbons, heavy metals, and other toxic pollutants in soil and water. This is going to support bioremediation and waste treatment, which is going to help create cleaner and healthier ecosystems. And last but not the least, CRISPR is being used to engineer microbes to produce industrial enzymes like proteases, lipases, cellulases, etc., with higher activity and stability, which is going to improve the performance in the industries such as food processing. We have the textiles, we have paper production, we have the detergents, so more efficient detergents, the ones which are going to clean up faster, which is going to require less water, etc. So there are indirect benefits also. And then we also have the bio-based chemical production. So all these applications are going to lead towards green biotechnology, which is going to help us to improve the industrial productivity while reducing the environmental impact. Despite being CRISPR being a very promising technique which can be used for gene editing purposes, there are several important ethical issues and challenges that need to be addressed. So number one is off-target mutations, which is the technical risk that we have. So, we know that CRISPR can sometimes edit unintended regions of the genome, which can lead to unexpected mutations that could affect the normal gene function. We have an example where in early laboratory studies, unintended edits were observed in non-target DNA regions, which actually raise safety concerns for clinical therapies. Then we have the germline editing concern. Editing genes in embryos or the reproductive cells can introduce changes that are passed on to the future generations, which raise serious ethical questions about the designer babies. The controversial 2018 case, which happened in China, where CRISPR was used to modify embryos for HIV resistance, which led to global condemnation, and people really, advocated that there should be very strict regulations with respect to using CRISPR in human germline editing. In fact, if you go, on the Google search or internet search, you will find that people are making statements that by 2030, the CRISPR's gene editing ability will raise ethical questions about its ripple effects. So one is, like you're doing one case study, and in that you are seeing the adverse effects or adverse observations. But there are other ripple effects. That is, one effect which is going to lead to multiple ripple effects, multiple effects. And also in terms of the designer babies, and even what it means to be human, because if there is going to be a germline editing, who knows what kind of impact it's going to have on the overall existence of human species. And then, of course, we have the high cost and the accessibility of this particular technology or therapy. We know that CRISPR-based therapies are currently very expensive, which is going to limit their access mainly to the patients who are very rich or the patients who are in the developed countries and, the ones which have the financial resources. For example, the treatment like Casgevy for sickle cell disease is expected to cost over 1 to 1.5 or rather $2 million per patient, which is going to make it very challenging for the common man to access it. And then we have the regulatory challenges. Governments and regulatory agencies are still developing guidelines. We still do not know the ripple effect of this. We still do not know how safe this technology is. So if we are not sure of something, we cannot have proper rules. So the rules and regulations are also evolving. They are still being developed to ensure that the use of CRISPR technology becomes safe and also ethical. We have agencies such as FDA in US and EMA in Europe, which require extensive clinical trials and long-term monitoring before they give their approval for CRISPR-based therapies. So these the safety concerns and the regulatory concerns are very important, which needs to be addressed before this therapy or this technology is actually applied, especially in the field of medicine. So these challenges highlight that there is a need for strict regulation, ethical oversight, and we need to have a debate about the technological improvements that we are making, the regulations that we need, and what are the ethical guidelines that we need to follow. Which if when once we are going to get that, we are going to make sure that CRISPR is used responsibly, safely, and also available to everyone. Some of the safety issues related to CRISPR technologies are being addressed by the use of the next generation CRISPR technologies. We have already discussed about the prime editing and base editing. So for example, base editing has been used to correct mutations responsible for sickle cell disease and certain genetic eye disorders. Prime editing has been used to correct mutations which are linked to Tay-Sachs disease and cystic fibrosis. So these are the technologies which are used without creating double-strand breaks or causing extensive off-target mutations, which is going to reduce many of the safety risks and ethical concerns which are associated with the conventional genome editing technologies. So these advances are making the genome editing more safer, more accurate, and more suitable for clinical applications, and which is going to actually lead towards the precision medicine, which is going to become a routine healthcare, part of the routine healthcare of the patients. So CRISPR-Cas9 is not only being used for cutting DNA, but we are also now entering into the epigenome editing. So by deactivating the Cas9 protein, which is the dead Cas9, and then fusing it with epigenetic modifiers, we can turn on the genes or we can turn off the genes. And all this while we are not altering the underlying DNA sequence. And this approach is called CRISPR epigenome editing. And how it works? We have CRISPR-A, which is activation, where we have dCas9, which when it is going to be fused with transcriptional activators, like we have the example of VP64, it is going to boost the gene expression. So genes are going to be expressed, activate. And then we have CRISPR-RI, which is the CRISPR interference. In this case, we have the dCas9 alone, which is going to block the RNA polymerase and which is going to lead to the knockout gene or silencing of the gene expression. And then we have the epigenetic writers and erasers, where the dCas9 is fused to enzymes that are going to add or remove the DNA methylation or the histone modifications. So this way we can also manipulate the epigenome to express the gene or switch off a gene using CRISPR-Cas9. In this slide, you can see some of the very recent examples where CRISPR has been applied in epigenetics. So we have the first example where researchers used CRISPR-RA to reactivate the fetal hemoglobin in patients-derived blood stem cells as a potential treatment for sickle cell disease. And that too without cutting the DNA, which the whole thing appeared in Nature Biotechnology in 2025. We have the memory enhancement. So in the mouse model of Alzheimer's, the CRISPR-RA, which was made to target the BDNF gene, restored the long-term memory by increasing the histone acetylation at specific enhancers. This was reported in Cell Reports in 2026. And then in the case of epigenetics editing in plants, scientists at Peking University in China used dCas9 TET1 to demethylate a promoter in rice, which is going to lead to boosting the grain weight or the weight of the grain by 25%. And that too, we are not doing any gene modification in it. And this report has also appeared in Nature Plants in 2025. So now, why this is so important? This epigenetic editing, remember, is reversible. So this is the, for me, this is a real breakthrough, because when you are doing the alteration in the DNA, that is irreversible. But epigenetic editing is reversible. And it is also, please see, we are using the techniques which do not involve the risk of double-strand breaks. So there are no risk of off-target mutations or chromosomal rearrangements, etc. And it is especially promising for treating complex diseases like cancer, diabetes, neurological disorders, where gene expression and not the gene sequence is dysregulated. So overall, if we see the future prospects of CRISPR-Cas9, we can see that CRISPR is transforming the biotechnology into a precision-driven discipline with the potential to revolutionize, medicine, agriculture, industrial biotechnology, providing treatment for rare genetic disorders, common diseases, and also providing answers to personalized medicine. The future of CRISPR is going to be shaped by another two powerful technologies or technological advances. One of them is artificial intelligence or AI, and the second one is the shrinking CRISPR systems, which is also known as miniaturization. So in the case of artificial intelligence, the machine learning and AI, they are going to accelerate the CRISPR research by optimizing the guide RNA design. It is also going to help us predict off-target effects and then also identify new gene editing enzymes from studying large genomic databases. So we have platforms like Deep CRISPR, which are used to improve targeting, accuracy, and enzyme designs by which is going to reduce the unintended edits and enhancing the which is going to lead to enhance the safety of CRISPR-based therapies. We have AlphaFold based model, which is going to help us predict 3D structures of proteins, which is going to help us discover and engineer new CRISPR enzymes with better precision and activity. And then we have the shrinking CRISPR systems. This is going to help us in the way that, one of the major challenge in gene therapy is delivering large CRISPR components into the cells, especially if you have to give an in vivo application. So We have the development of compact systems like Cas12F, which actually allows the packaging, the whole thing becomes small enough to be efficiently packaged into the AAV vectors or adeno associated virus, which is going to enable efficient delivery to organs like the liver and the heart for potential treatment of genetic diseases. So these two advances which are associated with CRISPR, they are going to make CRISPR more precise, more efficient, and clinically applicable, bringing the gene editing closer to the widespread applications and their therapeutic use. So artificial intelligence is going to help us by optimizing the guide RNA design. So by looking at the large amount of data that we have, databases, we can predict which is the most effective guide RNA design we can select for precise targeting. It is also going to predict the off-target effects. What is going to happen if the gene is the target site is not the exact site. So what is going to happen, or are going to be the consequences of that? And then it is also going to help us discover new editing enzymes by the use of AlphaFold. So these are two fields which I think are going to have a tremendous impact on how CRISPR is going to be used in the future. And in this slide, you can see some of the references that I have used for the content on this presentation. So with this, we come to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for listening.